Eleanor, I really wanted to have you on the show because you, well, first of all, let's talk about your documentary, and because we'll get to I want to talk about your music too, because it's a thing that I've mentioned a lot on this show about how big corporations have co-opted even the entertainment industry. So you're not allowed to do any of that. But I want to share this screen with everybody just so people can see it. The Hard Road of Hope, which is hardroadofhope.com. And this is your documentary, which is available. It has won all of these prestigious awards. So why don't you tell us what this movie is, and not only where people can, obviously they can go to this website to see it, but what inspired you to do it, and why aren't you could have taken a big 6-figure or 7-figure gig at MSNBC, but instead you chose the lucrative world of activism, which is
I know. It's funny. I've said to people the past couple of years, it's almost like I've tried really hard to be poor and obscure with the life choices that I've made. Yeah, I mean, we can get to this later, but I was just recently on an interview where they were asking me like, well, why did what happened with your band? And I was like, well, basically I had several meetings with record execs who told me to get bigger tits and to stop writing political songs, write some love songs, and to wear skirts on stage. So here I am.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, you thought your music and being creative and artistic was going to work? No, we need you to get up there and shake it and talk about a breakup or a dance party or a dance party breakup or a party that dance parties breakup. Do a whole album of that, and you're set.
Yeah. So yeah, poor and obscure. And so the film is about West Virginia, which I know some people are like, but actually that is part of why I made it, because I grew up mostly in North Carolina, and like West Virginia is the butt end of jokes there, which something has gone awry if you're the butt end of jokes in North Carolina. So I really I was curious not only to go there as somebody who goes to frontline fights in terms of the environment, because West Virginia is in this crazy intersection of dying coal and the rise of fracking. But I also wanted to go there to see like why has West Virginia become the butt end of jokes? Like, why is it considered to be a throwaway state just filled with hillbillies who don't matter? And what's really fascinating is that it has this storyline around it, predominantly because it used to be the exact opposite. Like, West Virginia's history is radical. Like at the turn of the 20th century, the mine wars happened. It's actually the 100th anniversary this year of the Battle of Blair Mountain, where mine workers came together, black and white and immigrant mine workers came together and took up arms and shot at coal barons in order to win basic labor rights. And they won. They won the right to be paid in American money as opposed to being paid in like company scrip. Folks might be familiar with this song, I Sold My Soul to the Company Store. That's what he's talking about. They weren't paid with actual American money. They were paid with company money that they could only use at the company store. So you're basically like, it's indentured servitude because you can't like go to a different place and spend that money. They won better working conditions. Kids were no longer allowed to work in mines. One of the people I spoke to in the film, his grandfather started working in a mine at the age of 10. Which like I have a hard time even processing that, but that like wasn't that long ago. This guy's like in his 50s and his grandfather worked in a mine at the age of 10. The fact that he even got old enough to procreate is mind-boggling to me. So, and this is the history of West Virginia. And it's this radical history of people working together across culture, across race at the turn of the 20th century, when that was unheard of anywhere, but in particular the South. And this happened in West Virginia, and it's really been buried in West Virginia. And so West Virginia is a home of a radical past and a deeply propagandized and splintered, like more recent history and present. And it's really kind of like it's a mirror to look at the rest of the country and see how we have collectively been propagandized, but also how we collectively have this radical past, particularly in terms of labor rights. And so I think that like the reason that I wanted to highlight West Virginia in particular is because it's such a perfect microcosm of the propaganda that we consume, that we're programmed with, and the radical past that we really have to reconnect with if we want to make a difference in the present and build a better future.
Well, it sounds like you just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But no, there's some feedback echo thing. Am I the only one hearing this?
On me, I don't hear it.
Now it's
Is
gone.
it me?
Okay. This is why Lee and I do Government Secrets, is because we just keep learning about story after story after story like this that was hidden from us for a very specific reason. I grew up in Chicago. I did not know about Fred Hampton until 2 years ago when Chris Hedges talked about him in his book and talked about him on the Jimmy Dore show. I didn't know about Fred Hampton. I didn't know there was a neighborhood called Hillbilly Harlem in a city I grew up in. Mm-hmm. And this is the same thing that they've done in West Virginia. They hide in, and it's this, look, it's the same thing. Oh, a bunch of working class blacks and whites and Latinos all got together to say, stick it to the ruling class. They're like, nope, we can't let that story get out. Yeah. we need everybody to think that there's this race war happening 24/7. And it's like, America, the thing that's so I don't know what's the word, insidious, I guess, about the propaganda is it is taking a part of America's, what many Americans like to view themselves as we're the revolutionaries. We stood up to King George and we fought for things and we have all these great rights in this country. Well, one of the things that we have is great labor laws. Yep. Because of all of these labor battles in the early 1900s specifically. And it's the same story. So that of the wealthy coming in and crushing it. And now they buy the propaganda. And that's the narrative of West Virginia. Oh, they're a bunch of a bunch of hillbilly Trump supporters or whatever. And it's like, no, man, they've been screwed over. Like the people in West Virginia voted for Bernie Sanders overwhelmingly in 2016 and then voted for Trump because they didn't forget NAFTA. They didn't forget how Clinton neoliberal policies took their jobs away. Yep. And then I remember after Hillary lost in 2016, Bernie did that town hall in West Virginia. And all these like people who you would think are just Trumpers were like, oh, I'd vote for this guy because they've been screwed over by labor. I mean, literally they know, I mean, in that movie, I forget knock down the doors or whatever with AOC and Paula Jean Swearengin or whatever. That documentary, I forget it, but it was about them all running right before we learned that AOC was a sellout. And it was, she was talking to her mom and her mom was like worried. She's like, there's bodies up in those hills. The coal companies kill people that fight them. You know what I mean? That's the long, rich history of this. And it goes to another reason why, like, why hasn't this story been made by A-list actors in Hollywood? Wouldn't this make a great story? And like, I was shocked that the Fred Hampton movie kind of snuck through because it's like, they don't want to show people working together. They don't want to do that. So I guess it's like learning all this and having this uncovered. What was the experience of the people you interviewed in West Virginia? And obviously you heard about this guy whose grandfather was, working in coal mines at 10. And then sort of the eye-opening, because that's the thing that I love about documentaries is they can really show you a subculture that you weren't aware of and educate you about stuff that you had no idea about and take you as the filmmaker into a place that sounds like, yeah, you grew up with these jokes about West Virginia or whatever. And it probably opened your eyes as a filmmaker. Like when I went to Afghanistan as a comedian, I'd never been with the military. I had no idea what they went through. And that opened my eyes. And going to Russia, the last documentary I did, I had no idea what Russia was about. I had no idea. So like, how was that journey for you? And then for people that you've shown it to, I'm sure you've got, friends and college educated friends on the East Coast who probably have that negative stereotype of West Virginia. How has this movie impacted them?
Yeah, so I think like that, just that question brings up a really solid point, because what the reason that I went there and the reason that I oftentimes have gone to like frontline communities is because I not only want to document, but I also want to help out. Like when I go to these places, I'm like, hey, do you need help with the ground support and the tree sit or whatever? I help out as an organizer as well as a journalist. And one of the things that this, I mean, I was kind of like feeling this before, but this just made it so much more obvious, and it allowed me to kind of put words to it and put, a film to it really. But the idea that like leftist organizers or environmental organizers or what have you will oftentimes go into predominantly white poor areas and talk down to people and treat them like they're idiots and say, listen, this is what you need to know. And, nobody wants to be talked to like they're an idiot. And I think the problem is that we on the left do a really good job of dissecting race and gender, but less so class. And that's really concerning because, in particular, these rural and poor white communities are right in the crosshairs for the KKK. And if we don't reach out to them and try to build community with them, guess who's going to? And I think that that's like something that's very important to highlight, that no matter who you're talking to, don't talk down to them. And this class lens is super important to take with you wherever you're going. And also recognizing that just because somebody doesn't have a liberal arts education doesn't mean that they don't know what it feels like to be oppressed. You brought up the fact that people voted for Bernie in 2016. Why? Because he was speaking to their needs. They know what they need in order to thrive, in order to survive. And when some when some big green organization comes in and says, well, you need to quit your jobs because you're hurting the planet. What the hell am I supposed to do with that? Like, yeah, great. I'll quit my job and then what? Like watch my family starve? That sounds great, but at least I'll save a tree. Like that doesn't scan for people. Like, and it shouldn't. It should, like, people need to be talked to like they're human beings, and also recognize the situations they're in. I don't know anybody who is, like at career day at school when you're in kindergarten that says, I want to get black lung when I'm 40. Like, I don't think that that's a thing that happens. And so treating these people like they're idiots and that they want to die young for the sake of dirty energy is just so stupid. And it's totally unhelpful for building community and actually doing outreach and building these solidarity networks that we need in order to combat the fossil fuel industry. Or like, George Carlin put it, the fact that America is an oil company with an army. So in order to combat that, you really do need to have these organizing efforts that reach out to people that have been propagandized and be able to, and I'm not necessarily saying that like Black organizers should do this, but particularly white organizers, go into these poor white rural communities, sit down on a porch and have a beer and say, hey, you don't trust the Democrats? Neither do I. Let's talk about it. And then like have these conversations, and they will be icky at times, but then you can have these one-on-one conversations. And this is where that organizing really starts to take root. And the activism that is teaching history. Like, it's one thing to say, hey, at some point, sometime, whatever ago, somebody cared about labor rights, like in Wisconsin. But to say that, no, your great grandfather took up arms and shot at coal barons, like that is something deeply personal. And that is something really powerful to share with people that's been kept from them, a powerful piece of their own history. And so I think like it's really powerful to teach that history. And that's something that like, that's probably the main thing that I took away from, and that I learned, is that we have to do better when we go into these spaces and do a lot more listening than we do talking. And, also recognize that these people know what they need. They need like collaboration in getting it. They don't need to be told what that is.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, you bring up such a great point of the condescending plays right into the propaganda that they're fed. And you also, of like, oh, these liberal elites in the big cities think you're dumb and they want to take your job away and they want to take your gun away or whatever. And they don't care. They want to outlaw beer and milk or whatever their propaganda that they're fed. And they're fed some crazy propaganda. But then, liberal people who watch MSNBC and CNN, they don't want to wake up to the reality that they're fed a bunch of crazy propaganda. I don't know. Russia's stolen everything. Russia prevented Hillary from campaigning in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, I guess. Like Putin turned the motorcade away from those states. Or maybe it was Jill Stein, or probably Angry Burn Bros. I think it was Burn. But that's such so again, like why I'm such a student of history is in history, when you bring up the historical facts, people go, oh, wow, I had no idea. It's like what we're learning about the, Black Wall Street, what happened in Tulsa. Didn't even know that existed, let alone how horrifically it was taken down. So if you were to campaign in those, and the Democratic Party will never do this, but some type of independent candidate or People's Party or whatever should go to West Virginia and say, yeah, your great grandparents shot at coal barons. Because here's the thing. People working in the coal and the fossil fuel industry, they know it's awful. They see the poison contaminated water. They have the black lung. They have kids who've been with, bizarre health issues, and they've seen all that stuff. They would gladly work in a solar panel plant or making wind turbines or whatever it is. But you can't come in there and say, quit your jobs, you're evil.
Yeah.
You got to say, we're going to transition you. Like this is what a real Green New Deal would be. And you make that the cornerstone of the Green New Deal is we're going to transition you at the same, you're making 50 grand a year in the coal mines. You're going to make 50 grand a year moving over to green energy or whatever that is. Because
interestingly enough, the UMWA, the United Mine Workers of America, released a statement, I think earlier this month, that said that they want a just transition. This is the Union for Mine Workers that put out a statement saying they want a just transition away from coal. Like you said, they're well aware. And yes, there are still some people in coal country who feel deeply connected to it. And feel that it's part of their identity. But why do they feel that way? They feel that way because they feel that they've helped to build America, and they have pride in that work. Okay, well then you can also have pride in building a sustainable future, right? It's about taking this pride that has been propagandized and twisted into something really dark and sinister, and putting it into something that could actually, give people the ability to survive for the next 30 years.
Yeah, and you bring up a lot too about the economics of this and how basically the KKK is a gang that comes in and preys them. It's the same model in the inner cities. There's not a lot of opportunity, and the street gangs in the inner cities, the Black and Latino street gangs, it's the same thing. It's the same thing that ISIS does. There's disenfranchised young Muslim males, not a lot of job, not a lot of opportunity. This gang comes in and says they're the ones over there. They did it. So blame them, and everyone join. And with nothing, it's the same model. You take people that haven't been given a lot of opportunity and have been propagandized. And every American needs to realize they've been propagandized. We all need to accept that. You just ask yourself, who lost the most in World War II? Was not America. It was Russia. It was 20 to 25 million people. So that's the thing that's so critical. And it's such that's why, Bernie doing those town halls on Fox News was so important, and why someone with a real populist message, and it's again too, that the neoliberals and the Democratic Party refuse to acknowledge that Trump, while had many racist, xenophobic things in his first campaign in 2016 and throughout his presidency, did run in 2016. He didn't really do it in his reelection, but in 2016 he ran on a very populist platform. He said, I'm going to bring your job back. And when Hillary was going to $10,000 a plate dinners, he was standing in front of closed down factories saying, I'm going to open this factory back up and I'm going to bring your job back. You could say it was nonsense or lies or whatever, but that was his message. And she didn't have that message. And he was perceived as different, even though he's of course not. He is the poster child of the totally facocked, 1%, but he was perceived as different.
And people remember Clinton. They remember that he kiboshed welfare. They remember the crime bill. Like, they know that he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Like, this is, I mean, people might be goldfish in some aspects, but when you talk about the Clinton dynasty, like literally that's what we're talking about. They're like, no, thanks. I'm going to go with something that seems to be different, or the guy who says he's a democratic socialist. Like, they're totally opposite sides of the spectrum. And I mean, Bernie's really not that left. I mean, coming from Sweden, he's like a centrist, but like, still, these are the options because you know what the same gets you. And so to vote for the same just seems insane. And so you're like, well, I'm going to go for what seems different. And if you kill Bernie, which of course the Democrats did twice, then I guess I'll go with the neo-fascist.
Yeah. Well, what is the reaction, Ben, when you've shown this movie to specifically people in bigger cities, college educated, probably never been to West Virginia, don't know what it's like? Because I've just noticed that as a comedian, having traveled all over this country, and I talk to friends of mine who live in big cities. They've never been through the middle of the country. They don't know what it's like. And I'm like, yeah, you have no idea. When they were like, oh my God, Trump, where did all these racists come from? I'm like, they've been there a while. This has been there a while. And they also have not driven through this country and seen the decimated economics of this country. They haven't seen the closed factories and just towns that are like virtual ghost towns. They haven't seen the opioid epidemic just crush mainly rural areas. They haven't seen that because, drugs have always been sort of a big city thing. So they've never witnessed. I mean, you drive through like Eastern Ohio, there's just opioid crisis, opioid epidemic. I mean, it's all over the place and it's brutal. And these big pharmaceutical companies pushed it. And so seeing how so many like college educated big city people have no clue, what has the reaction been from some friends of yours or even just people in an audience? I know you've screened it at a lot of festivals. It looks like what is the reaction from people who have never been to this part of the country? How are they perceiving it?
Yeah, well, I mean, in particular, the opioid epidemic, West Virginia holds the uncoveted first place of, the top of the opioid epidemic in terms of addiction and death. So it's the third poorest state in the nation. It's the second most rural. So there you go. And so the response, particularly from people in cities, has been far more quiet actually than people who live in like the Rust Belt and people who live in Colorado or California and places that have been taken over by fracking and things like that, because there's kind of like a recognition of solidarity there. I think people in cities have had this kind of, a few people have reached out and said like, wow, I didn't realize that this was happening. This is really fascinating. Thanks for talking about it. But I've also gotten responses that like, why is this important? Which I think is really funny because how is it not? I like on so many different levels. It's important because of the history of labor rights and understanding, kind of like what y'all do with government secrets. You can't understand where the hell you are in the present unless you understand the past. It's like being like out to sea. If you have the map, then at least you can be like, oh, this is where we came from. If you don't have the map, then you're blind and you're just wandering through the doldrums, completely lost. So knowing the past gives you that map, and then you can actually chart your future, like, and make good decisions, as opposed to like, I guess I'll just wander around because I don't understand where I came from. So how can I possibly understand where I'm going? And so from that perspective, it's hugely important, but also just from the eco side perspective, Appalachia is like one of the most biodiverse regions in the world. And it's also at the crosshairs of both coal and fracking. Like, wow, what a massive commentary on our extreme addiction to fossil fuels. And, the attempts at things like solar and wind, which, by the way, would be great on decimated mountaintops, small, localized, locally owned and operated, solar farms and arrays and things like that. But so the question as to why this is important that I've gotten from a couple of people, it really just speaks to the bubble, right? the bubble of the urban lifestyle, the bubble of I have a reusable tote bag and a Prius, ergo I don't need to care about, fossil fuel companies or, wandering through coal slurry on my way to school like a kid in West Virginia. It's this very like, and having lived in LA for 10 years, it's like it was so hard to organize there because of that, because of this perspective that, sitting there in Santa Monica with a little with like a little like a prosecco or whatever, and you're like, I used a glass water bottle today. It's like that you've done your part to save the whales or whatever, and it's like it's so incredibly infuriating because it's all about that personal choice and your privilege to make that personal choice, as opposed to people who live in these places whose choices are Walmart and to work for a coal company, and not looking at the systemic structure in order to understand that, oh yeah, it is 100 companies that are responsible for 70% of global emissions, or the US military's emissions are equal to that of 140 countries. Like we can't address climate change with your Prius and your glass water bottle that costs like $20. That's not going to cut it. And so it really just speaks to these like annoying bubbles of liberalism.
Yeah. When they're just like, just manifest it. That's like a whole.
It's on my vision board.
just put not living in toxic fracking water on your vision board, and then you'll be fine. Just have your wealthy parents co-sign a loan to open an organic clothing store that's overpriced and no one can afford.
It's the mindfulness version of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
It is the mind. They're just not as mindful in West Virginia.
Right?
They just weren't mindful. They just weren't mindful. They just manifest it. Just manifest no more coal mines. Just
put it out there to the universe.
Oh
my God. I just have to tell this story because it is the most LA thing I think that I've seen. So I went to visit. This was probably back in 2018. A couple of years after I moved, and my friend and I were about to go for a hike, and so we stopped off at this juice place because it's LA, and to get like a snack before we go. And I just saw like along the wall there's like a variety of faucets, like 5 different faucets that all have little signs on them. One says like prosperity, one says love, and I was like, what the hell is going on? And this girl walks past me to one of the faucets and starts filling up a water bottle. And I'm like, I gotta know what the hell this is about. So I walk up to the cash register and I'm like, excuse me, what is going on here? And she's like, that's our intention water. And I was like, wait, what? And she's like, so we have ceremonies around the water where we bless it with intention, and then you can buy that for your own use and your own intentions. And I was like, that's LA tap water, right? Like, can we? That's just straight up LA. Like, you're not even putting that shit through a filter. And then she's like, well, we've held ceremony around it, and I'm like, okay, this is the most LA thing I've ever heard in my entire. And people are buying it, and it's like expensive.
So, if I hear you correctly, you're saying Flint, Michigan just should have had one of these ceremonies? Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Yes. The intention there would have been clean, and then I think we would have been okay.
Just make clean water your intention. Just say, I want authentic water. That's
if you run it over a crystal, then
oh God, the crystals. Oh, it's weird. The crystals didn't cure COVID. I thought the crystals were going to cure COVID.
I just don't think that you you need to use them as an enema, Graham. So if you just really shove it up there.
Okay, great. What a great intention. Take this crystal and shove it up your ass, you dumb hippie. Well, I'm here with Eleanor Goldfield. Where can people see this movie, your documentary?
It's at hardroadofhope.com.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Political Vigilante. My name is Graham Elwood. Please hit the like button, share this out. I'm here talking with Eleanor Goldfield, who has directed an amazing documentary about labor history in West Virginia, but also you're a musician and you've made a lot of, you have a new EP out, I believe, with a lot of activist songs. And I really want to talk about that because it's something I've tried to make clear to my audience as someone who's been in the entertainment industry my entire adult life. When we talk about the corporate media, I'm not just talking about news outlets. I'm talking about how they have hijacked any sort of activism within mainstream music, film. I mean, you look at the 60s and 70s, every artist had to have some type of activist something. They had to take a stand on the Vietnam War, on equal rights, on civil rights. You had to have a stand, take a stand on that. And all of the movies that came out in that era, The Deer Hunter and, Apocalypse Now, 3 Days of the Condor, stuff like that. I mean, these movies that were very anti-war, even though some of the Vietnam movies, the depiction of Vietnamese was very kind of skewed and stereotypical, but they were still anti-war movies. And you could have that kind of social commentary. And that social commentary gets through every once in a while now. But mainly when you have 5 multinational conglomerates that own 95% of all media. I mean, you think some cool online streaming no, they're owned by some massive corporation that probably, owns fracking and central bank money. They whatever, they're in arms trading and probably had Epstein over whatever horrible ruling class shit that they're into. And so you're not like, I talk about this as a comic. You're not going to get a Netflix special doing the kind of comedy that I do or Lee Camp does or Jimmy Dore, that's not going to happen, calling out the war machine. So I know you talked a little bit about it in the other segment, but walk us through your journey as an artist. I know you were living in LA, and I'm sure that just was great dealing with LA record executives. They're just the best people in the world. I mean, they're just good. They're just good people. So walk us through what that's like and how and then what it breeds is also self-censorship. You're like, well, I could do this, but as a comedian, it's like, I could call out how horrific our political system is, but you can do a couple of Trump jokes about his hair, or maybe Joe Biden seems sleepy, but you can't call him a rapist and a warmonger. So walk us through that journey as a musician and also, walk us through all that. That was a long question.
Everybody, let's go for a walk. So yeah, well, I think I oftentimes say that I got it on both sides of the glass because I worked in recording studios. And so I worked, and when I say both sides of the glass, I mean control room and live room and that sort of like as an artist, but also as somebody who works as a tech, because that was my job. It's a barrel of laughs. It was, I think like just particularly as a woman, like the extreme sexism that exists is also, it's really amplified because of the politics. So for instance, it wasn't just a problem that I was, a woman, and therefore like one of the stories that I like telling is, for instance, we're playing the Viper Room in LA, and we're there for sound check. So I go to the door to get in for sound check. And the doorman says, girlfriends aren't allowed in yet. And I said, that's great. When they get here, I'll be sure to let them know, but you're not going to get a fucking sound check unless you let me in. So there was that like pretty much any female had to deal with in that industry. But then the fact that I didn't fit that mold of, in particular, like in the hard rock scene, which is where I was, like predominantly like big tits that are always in a push-up bra, which I really don't even understand the physics of that, because like singing with a push-up bra, I've never understood how that works, because he like constricts your diaphragm, but whatever. Mazel tov to the people who make that work. But like, the stereotype for the hard rock chick was, that visual, and like the big heels and the boots and the mini skirts and the fishnets. I always went on stage in my motorcycle boots and my jeans and a t-shirt. So I already didn't fit that like perceived necessity of the hard rock chick. And then the fact that I would go on stage with an American flag and then like step on it. And you know, in between songs talk about like US empire, like that was just like you're just adding to the nose on the list of like access to anything. um and so it became really like untenable. And I've talked about this before too, like the weight of oh, did I disappear? Oh, there I go. Okay. The weight of decisions that the band makes, like in terms of, you know, whether you're going to write love songs or not, it falls on typically the front person, which was me. And it becomes even more amplified again because being a woman who's very political, it was my fault that the band didn't get further because I weighed my morals against my dreams and decided that my morals mattered more, because if I gave up those to achieve my dreams, then they wouldn't actually be my dreams. They'd be some record exec's dreams. And I don't care about him. He can go suck it. So so it like there was just a lot of layers of like guilt and shame that were shoved at me. And you know, even with all of that, I would say that I would never trade it for anything because I had a great time and it was incredibly powerful. I'm super proud of the music that we made, the music that we put out there, and the experiences, you know, like opening up for Tom Morello and stuff like that, like really powerful and amazing experiences I wouldn't trade. But continuously going up against that wall of you're not the appropriate front woman, I just decided that like, okay, I guess I'm not. And that I guess that this is then not for me because I'm not going to live somebody else's dream. The whole point of moving here at the, you know, the young age of 18 with stars in my eyes was because I wanted to do it my way. And if I can't, I will choose a different path. So that's what I've done. And you know, music has been kind of difficult since the band broke up, but this latest release has really been a way for me to unpack that. It's been a way for me to like continue to do the political music, but without having to check in with the band, which is kind of nice. Like there's no drummer being like, you can't hear my kick drum. You know, like there's no bass player that's like, you're not hearing my riff or whatever. Like, and so that's kind of nice. Even though it felt a little lonely in the studio, it was still nice to have to rely on myself, and to lean into my own like musical abilities, which are not great, but they're there, and I can, you know, and I'm working on making them better. But just having that experience of creating this solo album, which is 3 original songs and 2 spoken word pieces, has been really important. And also just kind of bucking the system in that sense that like, oh yeah, you can't put spoken word music on the same album, watch me. You know, I don't care about your reviews, I don't care about your, you know, strict genres and shit. Like I'm so over that. I tried for so many years to like make sure that shit fit right, and that we were, you know, that we looked right, and like only guys with long hair could play in the, you know, all that shit. Now it's like, you know what, whatever, I'm just going to put shit on there that I like, and find other people that like it. And if you don't listen to it, just leave me alone. I'm like, I'm done with the industry side of things, because it's just so soul sucking. And even though I'm obviously part of it to the extent that I'm putting music out there, I'm no longer looking for industry approval. I'm no longer looking for that record exec meeting. I'm no longer looking for that. I'm looking for, you know, the clubs that I can play and connect with people on a one-to-one basis. I've let go of the Wembley Stadium dream, you know? So yeah, I like, that's kind of the abridged version of the musical journey. And the studio journey is not totally different, but it's another beast. But yeah.
Well, there's a freedom in that. There's a freedom in letting, and when you finally come to that conclusion of, you know what, I'm not playing this game anymore. I hit it. I'd been doing this show about 4 or 5 months. I started January of 2017, and I had 164 subscribers when I started, and I don't know. And then I was building, and I had, 3, 4, 5,000 subscribers or something like that. And I did this. They asked me to do this movie game show. It was like a pilot presentation, since I had hosted a bunch of game shows and I did a movie review podcast and I've directed a couple films. I was like, they asked me to do this, and it was a producer that I knew, and I didn't even have to audition. I was just hired, and we were gonna do a pilot presentation at the San Diego Comic-Con. This would have been, it was perfect. I was handpicked to do this gig, and I'm like, we're gonna do this presentation. I was even involved in the like structure of the game show because I've done a bunch of game show pilots and stuff like that. And I was like, okay. And then they called me up and they saw my Twitter feed where I was being critical of Anthony Rendon, a California state Democrat who just voted down single payer healthcare in the state of California. Good old Democrats.
I know. Always there for you.
Always there for you. And he said, I'm sorry, man. And he called me up. I heard it in his voice. And I was like, oh, wow. And I remember having to make this decision. I was like, I've only been doing this YouTube show for 4 or 5 months. If I keep doing this YouTube show, I'm basically saying probably no to a lot of mainstream Hollywood work. I mean, that's probably what's going to happen. And I thought about it and was like, nah, fuck you. And then I released a video saying, this is what happened. I didn't name the guy's name or anything, but I said, this is what happened. And it was for this online streaming service that's owned by this massive conglomerate that owns 40 different. So you think it's all these independents. It's not. And like, it's like when you learn Chipotle's are owned by Coca-Cola or whatever, you're like, okay, great. Or McDonald's, whatever, which is one of those assholes. And yeah, and I made that decision, and it was kind of scary because I've done over 300 episodes of TV. I've, done late night stand-up. I've, had all these, I got scripts I want to sell and all this stuff. And to kind of be like, I got to say no to this. But then the freedom that comes from, I'm going to do this my way. And you know what? Nobody tells me what I can and cannot say on the show, even though YouTube's demonetizing me. Fine. I'm over on Rockfin. Fine. I don't give a shit. And so there's a freedom in that. And I'm sure creatively, like if I ever got like mega wealthy, or if I would have a record label, and just because the thing is there's I'm not a musician, nor am I a music producer, but I would just own a label, because to find musicians that are doing social commentary is hard now. You have to really dig through it, because the big labels, as you've laid out, they're not going to let that happen. You're not going to get and they probably lay it out for you. They're like, look, wear this bra, this outfit, sing these songs, and we'll get you in the big arena.
Yeah.
Or, wear t-shirts and boots and you can play that rock club.
Yeah, exactly.
But like, so subject, like how freeing was it then artistically to just do this album, just you in a studio? Is it just you playing guitar basically for some of the songs, or what?
So I'll say first of all that like I always did what I wanted to do. It's just that I accepted that would never be synonymous with like fame. After once the band folded, because one of the reasons the band folded is that the band was pissed at me for quote unquote standing in their way, which again, like kind of unfair. But I think like I always felt very strongly about doing it my way. And now I just have, like you said, like the freedom to recognize that I'm no longer trying to make it. Like my version of making it now is to have people, like, to be on shows like yours and to have people message me and be like, holy shit, that was really awesome. I enjoyed it. Like, and eventually playing a show live, if that's a thing we could ever do again. Like that to me is making it. I'm not, the freedom of being able to do it my way I've always felt like I'm doing it my way, but now I really have the ability to let go of any of the like the guilt and the shame that's associated with doing it my way. And it's also nice to not feel like I'm letting down a band, because you do become family. And so you feel like you're letting down like your brothers by making these decisions. And that's really shitty. Because for all of the shit that went down, which is plenty, I did love those guys, and I still, part of me will always feel bad because I'm Jewish, and so I carry that guilt. That's just what I do. So, but I mean, it was incredibly freeing, but I'll say, like, one of the reasons, or the reason that the album is called No Solo, even though it is my first solo album, is because I also recognize that even sitting alone in that studio that used to be filled with 4 other sweaty dudes, I realized I'm not actually alone in here, because there's the engineer and their producer that's on the other side of the glass that's like with me, because let's be honest, producers are really therapists. And there's a guitar player there who's doing the lead work and throwing out ideas. And then there's like all the people that weren't in the studio with me, but also like cheering me on and being like, this is so cool that you're doing this, and I'm like super stoked for you. And so all of that support. So even though I was sitting alone in this studio, I wasn't actually alone. And this also speaks to the parallel that I've felt on the front lines. Like when I'm standing in front of a bunch of cops or a bunch of pipeline workers, and you feel horrifically alone, and yet you realize you're not really alone, because you have so many people in solidarity with you that are on your side, that are on the front lines in other places and in other, in other spaces, in other times even. And you're fighting a fight that is not your own, that it belongs to all of us. And there is so much connection and community and collectivity there. And so both on an artistic level, and then on a level of overtly political, and as an organizer, you're not alone, even when you technically physically are. And so that was really kind of me unpacking that and me speaking to that as now a solo artist.
That's awesome. So this is your first solo album.
It is.
That's great. And where can people get it?
So you can get that and all of my work really at artkillingapathy.com, and you can listen to the tracks on iTunes or Spotify, but please, if you like it, buy it at artkillingapathy.com, because Spotify and iTunes are assholes and they don't support artists. So support your independent artists, and if you dig something, go to their sites and buy it. Mine is artkillingapathy.com.
You know what I want to make? I want to make like poppy dance songs, but just have all these like socialist lefty messages in there that are super poppy, but just like,
please.
I really want to do that. I'm not a musician, but who knows? I will.
I'd buy that album, Graham. I totally would.
Right? Like if I'm really banking, if all these cryptocurrencies go through the roof, like I'm hoping they will, because I know these billionaire fucks just deliberately dropped the price so they could buy up more soulless assholes that they are. I'm holding mine. I didn't panic sell. So if I become a millionaire crypto guy, oh my God, am I going to unleash holy hell on the fucking ruling class media? And we're just going to do poppy fun. So there's socialist messages. Just, it's going to be action movies where we're fighting the military industrial complex.
Yes.
They won't know they're not going to know what's going to hit them.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Eleanor, for taking time to come on our show and tell us about
so much for having me.
Your documentary and your new album. And we really appreciate the work you're doing. So any final thoughts?
Really appreciate what you're doing. Keep doing it. And thanks so much for having me.
Anytime. And we'll get you back on the game show to get revenge against Lee.
Oh, God. All right. Anything could happen. Even embarrassing shit.
It's totally true. Anything could happen. All right. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please hit the like button, the subscribe button. Go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood and rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, where you can support the show. Also, I have a Bitcoin wallet, a Bitcoin Cash wallet, and an Ethereum wallet in the show notes. We're taking cryptocurrency. I have a Coinbase affiliation link. We're going to be getting on some other exchanges. So that's how you support the show. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. YouTube is unsubscribing us at an alarming rate. I have a PayPal button at grahamelwood.com. I even have a Venmo at Graham-Elwood. There's a lot of ways to support our show. We are getting crushed by YouTube. We've dipped under 73,000 subscribers because of YouTube. Thanks for supporting what we do.